Hello and welcome to TelecomTV. My name is Martyn Warwick. We're here in London's Docklands in the east of London on a beautiful summer's day, and Boris's cable car folly is appearing in one of my ears and going out the other. I'm talking, we're at the Automotive and IT International Congress at a place called the Crystal in Docklands, and I'm talking with Arndt Ellinghorst, who is Senior MD and Head of Global Automotive Research Team at ISI. Quite a mouthful, that, Arndt. International Strategy and Investment. Now, as I understand it, your job, you are, rather than being an automotive exec, you're a stockbroker.
Yes, I mean, we look at the auto industry and our clients are institutional investors, and they're asking us, where should I invest? Should I buy a car maker? Should I buy a supplier? There's an IPO coming, what should I do? And my job is to sort of communicate between the industry and the investor, the finance community.
So, is the automotive industry of today a good, safe bet for investment?
Well, it depends. I mean, Europe is recovering slowly but steadily. The US is probably at the peak of the current cycle. China just keeps growing beyond belief. So there's been a lot of money that people made over the last couple of years. The supplier industry has been very, very successful, and people made a lot of money. So I think the industry is better today than it used to be. But in Europe, most companies are still losing money. It's a very challenged environment, and it will probably stay so for a while.
See, this is what would fascinate people who aren't involved in the industry on a day-to-day basis. They think car makers are rich and they make huge profits. You're telling us that that's not necessarily the case.
No, it's of course, I mean, not of course, but it is not the case. I would say of course, because you know, from the financials I look at, people are always shocked when I tell them 60 or 70% of the cars that are being sold in Europe are sold with a loss every year. These car makers are losing money. If they have a good year, they probably generate a profit of 300 euros per car. So the freedom to spend money in this industry is very, very limited.
So in Europe, let's take Europe, we're in Europe, let's take Europe. So the majority of vehicles that are being sold, cars that are being sold on an annual basis, are actually selling at a loss, or perhaps with a very, very wafer-thin margin.
That's true. I mean, the Italian auto industry losing money in Europe, the French auto industry mostly losing money in Europe, GM Europe losing money, Ford Europe losing money, the majority of Asians losing money in Europe, Volkswagen brand barely making any money. So if you add up all the different market shares, the industry is losing money.
Okay, now add to that the fact that we have new regulation, we have new compliance requirements for the environment, for exhaust emissions, for safety and all the rest of it. What effect is that having then? That's making things more expensive.
Well, I mean, the European Commission hasn't been helpful over the last 10 years to make the industry a more profitable space. Firstly, politicians have hindered the needed consolidation. Companies were bailed out even though they were chronically ill. And at the same time, Brussels came up with probably the strictest CO2 fuel efficiency regulation on the planet. The industry has to comply with 95 gram CO2 per kilometer by 2020. That's roughly a 20 to 30% incremental improvement in fuel efficiency from here until 2020. That's going to cost roughly 1,000 euros additional money to be spent per car. And as I said earlier on, if you're making 300 euros per car and someone's urging you to spend 1,000 extra just for the powertrain and the engine, that's tough.
So what does that mean for the car manufacturers in terms of being able to sell these new, very technologically sophisticated vehicles which everyone now expects to get? You expect the infotainment systems within the car, you expect all the safety features, you expect all the green features. What's happening to the automotive industry, let's stick with Europe, in trying to get this done within the constraints of the fact that they haven't got as much money as most people would think they have?
Well, if you look at a priority where to spend the money, firstly, you have to comply with the regulation. So there's no discussion. You can't sell cars which are not compliant. Otherwise, I mean, you can try. You might have to pay a penalty and the residual value of the car drops tremendously. So you will end up in a very uncompetitive situation. So that's where the money has to be spent first and foremost. And that's a real direct benefit for the consumer, of course. If the consumer has to spend less on fuel, that's a big ticket per month. Secondly, on what we're talking here today a lot about IT, the connected car and so forth, everything that's being brought to the car has to be A, paid by the consumer. So you've got to make sure there's a real use for the consumer and the consumer is paying the money for it. And B, if that's not the case, or if you're unsure, you have to take out the money elsewhere, and that could, for instance, be the distribution channel.
Fascinating. So what are the big trends you are seeing then as an advisor, as a stockbroker in the automotive industry of today?
First big trend is demographics. People are getting older people drive less, and younger people are less interested in cars. If younger people are interested, they are interested in new ways of mobility. They're interested in electric cars, they are interested in car sharing. So the form people are using mobility is changing, and that has a direct impact on the business model of a car maker. And of course, people want to be connected with their iPhones, their iPads, their Galaxies in a car. And most of the young people think when they enter a car, they feel that that's something from a different, from the Stone Age, basically.
Really? It's changing as quickly as that?
Well, I mean, the consumer electronics industry is changing every 2 or 3 years, and the life cycle of a car is 7 years. So you buy a new car that has been developed 5 or 7 years ago, of course, I mean, you can hardly plug in your mobile device and listen to music.
Sure. Okay. So what role then does IT and communications technology play in, do you think, in shaping the car of the future, given what you just said, having this long lead time, design time before anything comes to market?
Well, I think the life cycle of a product will shorten. And in order to sell a car that meets customer demand, what I said earlier on, younger population of car buyers, cars need to be updated faster. Tesla is a good example. Tesla can update the software of a car, not just the driving features, but also the infotainment system overnight.
These are the Tesla electric cars, which are becoming very popular in the United States.
Yes, that's the Tesla brand that has introduced the Model S as its major new product a while ago. It's a huge success in the US. The cars are being updated overnight, has a new software when you get in the car the next morning with the latest Google Maps and whatever people want. And that's something that's exciting customers. Traditional cars are less and less exciting for the younger generation. And Tesla and Elon Musk, their CEO, managed to come up with a car that is competitive, that's exciting people. But the big question is whether the traditional car makers have the mindset and the flexibility in place to adopt fast enough.
Absolutely fascinating. One last question to you, Arndt, if I might, which is about you driving a car. What sort of a car do you think you'll be driving in, say, a generation's time, or in 10, 15, 20 years, which is a long time anyway? By that I mean, I don't mean whether it'll be a particular model of car, a particular shape or anything like that, but what will it be? What will the car of the next decade, the decade after that be? Well,
firstly, I really believe in electric mobility. At a later stage, maybe even fuel cells, hydrogen fuel cells. So I think the combustion engine will increasingly be replaced. And that's not just because of energy restraints, that's also just related to pure driving pleasure. So I think mobility will be more electrical. But then I will probably and hopefully not own a car anymore. I will pay for mobility, say I'm a BMW premium customer. During the week when we need a car in an urban area, I will probably have an electric vehicle to drive around, drop the kids at school or university, wherever by then. And for the weekends, you probably have a bigger car and you want to go somewhere outside in the countryside. In the evenings, you might have a driver to drive you to a concert in London. So I think owning a car is increasingly outdated, but paying for mobility is something that consumers are increasingly, still willing to.
Really different perspective, really interesting to hear it. Arndt Ellinghorst, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.